The main subject of this evening was to look again at our efforts for fire prevention, looking at home hardening, starting with where we live from that 0 to 5 foot zone and then outwards into the neighborhood. And to that, we've invited LizAnne Jensen. She's going to speak to us tonight about home hardening. And I guess with no further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Liz.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, so my name is LizAnne Jensen, and as I mentioned, I work with the Fire Safe Council. I'm currently vice president for the organization. I'm also a recent evacuee and actually just got back fully into my home on Friday this week. So fire preparedness is a big deal and something we should all pay attention to. First, a little bit about the Fire Safe Council. The purpose of our council is to educate and mobilize the people of Santa Cruz County to protect their community, homes, and the environment from wildfire. And in a recent grand jury report, it was noted that Santa Cruz has the largest percentage of residents living in the wildland-urban interface, commonly called the WUI, of any county in the state. And what that translates to is 167,000 people or 72,000 homes located in these high-risk fire zone areas. First thing I'm going to talk about is different ways that houses can catch fire. And probably the most common one is the one you see in the upper left-hand corner. Is from embers and firebrands. And this photo is taken from the Insurance Institute of Business and Home Safety in Charlotte, North Carolina. They have a huge warehouse where they actually build houses and test different materials and vegetation around them to learn how fires react with homes. So much of the information I'm going to present tonight is based on research done at this facility. The second way, if you look at the image on the right, is direct flame contact. And when there's a red flag warning, you'll want to try and walk around your house and move anything outside your house that's flammable. Could be a broom, a stack of wood, could be leaves in your gutter, because if you get direct flame contact against your house, it's pretty dangerous. And the last one is radiant heat. And typically that occurs in neighborhoods when one house catches on fire. It actually generates so much heat that it can preheat the house next to it and catch it on fire. But the one really that causes the most damage are the embers and firebrands. And I wanted to start with this house. If you look at this photo, there's a lot of open space around this house, a lot of good clearance. There's green lawn around it. Yet this house burned almost to the ground. And by the end of this presentation, hopefully you'll be able to answer why this house burned. And when starting your process of hardening your home to fire, the strategy is you really want to work from your house outwards. Some people have done a lot of work 100 feet from their homes, but really what we call the 0 zone, which is the 5 feet immediately surrounding your house, is the place you really want to start. Once you've got that under control, you'll want to kind of move out to the 30 feet, and then from there 30 to 100 feet. You can do work in all these areas simultaneously, but really initially your focus should be on zone 0. And in zone 0, you want to start with your house itself. And the biggest surface you have on your home is your roof. And that is your largest vulnerability. So you're number one priority is the maintenance of your roof. And areas you particularly want to pay attention to are places where you have complex edges on your roof. They could be dormer windows, skylights, chimneys, things like that, because those are areas where leaves and other debris can accumulate. The second priority would be your vents. And all houses have vents because they actually help your house wick moisture out of it and are important to the keeping mold and other things out of your house. And there are roof vents, under the eave vents, gable vents, and foundation vents. And all of these vents you want to screen with 1/8 inch square screening. That's the ideal. Many older homes have 1/4 inch screening, and embers and other bits of blowing fire debris can get in through those. So that's another very important priority. And this talks a little bit about points of entry. I talked about, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, complex roof lines. You can have a Class A, brand new Class A roof, but if you have wooden framing up next to it and you have debris accumulation in that area, it can set your house on fire. The middle upper photo is at that test laboratory I talked about, and they're testing here 2 kinds of gutters. To the back of the house is a metal gutter, and it has leaves in it, and you can see that they've caught fire and they can wick in under the roof and catch the roof on fire. Closest to us is a vinyl gutter, which will melt and fall off the roof. But if you have vegetation down below, below the roof and the burning, melting gutter falls into it, you again can set your house on fire. Excuse me one sec. Okay. Another place connected to your house is your fence to your house. If your fence catches fire, it can go over and set your house on fire. I talked about the gable end vents, and you can see in this case actual embers blowing into the house. And if you store things in your attic, especially paper or other flammable materials, this is a way you can actually set your house on fire from the inside. And then the other photo is under the eave vents, again showing embers coming in through your vents. And this is the kind of thing you want to avoid. You can store things in your attic, but if you put them in heavy-duty plastic containers or other kinds of non-flammable containers, usually the embers that do come in are so small that they won't catch your house on fire, but this is a potential way embers could get into your house. And there's something for the state of California called California's Chapter 7A. You can Google it and find it online. And this is a place where various materials have been vetted for their being fireproof or not. And it not only applies to vents, but to siding, to all kinds of materials. So it's a good resource to find good materials. And just briefly, in Figure A, that's called an intumescent vent, and what it is behind the vent there's this sort of feels like kind of a waxy honeycomb material, and if embers or heat gets up close to that vent, they'll actually melt and seal the vent to keep flames, embers out of it. These do have to be replaced after a fire, but they are effective in keeping embers out. B is a kind that employs a steel wool mesh, and it doesn't say here, but that really should be stainless steel. And then C shows a baffle style vent, which makes it more difficult for embers to thread their way into your house. And the last one is a combination of screening with stainless steel mesh. So there are other types available, but these are some of the more common. Relatively speaking, they're inexpensive. And so, you know, if you want to start with the most bang for your buck, this is a good place to do some work. And this shows you a ridge vent area and a complex roof line where debris is accumulated. And if you think about the kind of embers that were coming down in our recent fire, this is a vulnerable spot right here. My husband and I make a policy whenever we have a red flag warning, we go up and sweep off our roof. Fortunately, ours is shallow enough we can brush it off, but that's a good thing to do just as preventative. So it's not 3 a.m. and you're worrying about embers landing on your roof. Skylights, there are two kind. The tempered glass ones are typically flat, but just imagine in the recent fire the embers raining down on these roofs. Even tempered glass will crack under heat, but they are a good choice. The domed ones have an advantage that usually the duff and other debris will slide off them, but again, it will accumulate at those complex roofs edges. So, you know, red flag warning, time to go up and sweep off your roof. Another vulnerable point of entry is where your gutters connect with your rafters or your roof edge. And if you've had your roofing done recently, you probably have a metal drip edge in place, but these are small flashing, they're not that expensive, and if you do have accumulation in your gutters of leaves or other debris, it helps prevent the fire from wicking in under your roofing. This is a case in point. Here you have a metal roof. Those are usually really pretty good for fire, but the conclusion was that there was leaf debris in their gutters, and it actually wicked in under their metal roof and caught this house on fire. And one thing we have all grown up with in California is sort of the Sunset Magazine model of landscaping, which is to anchor your home with vegetation right up next to your home. And the latest thinking is this is not a good idea. If you were anywhere near where the embers were blowing around with this recent fire, if you imagine them getting into this vegetation right up next to your house, even if you have double pane windows, that's a huge vulnerability. This is a photo from the fire up in Paradise. This is a relatively new home. It is well designed for fire, but the photo on the left shows the size of the embers that they picked up on this property. You can see the lawn is still green, but it got into the vegetation right in front of the house, and you can't really see it here, but those windows are cracked. The heat cracked the windows. Fortunately, they were double pane, so only the outermost panel cracked. But that is one place in the 0 zone surrounding your house, 0 to 5 feet, that you really don't want to have vegetation. And this is just another photo showing a small plant next to a stucco wall, but the heat, the embers got into it, and it was enough to crack the window on that home. And people often ask, you know, what kind of plants should you plant up next to your house? And the reality is there really is no fireproof plant. You can see in the photo on the right, that even cactus will burn if fire gets involved in it. What you want to do is select low growing, open structured, less resinous, higher moisture plants closer to your house, and Keep them small, well spaced, and as you move back further away from your house, you can go with larger groupings of plantings. This photo shows a really good application of the 0 to 5 foot zone. They have a nice clean roof. It is a shingled house, which is somewhat vulnerable, but they have done a good job creating hardscaping directly around the house. And you'll notice even the plant in front of their garage has been limbed up to keep embers from starting it on fire. And you just don't have to have bare scraped earth in front of your house. You can actually do creative landscaping in the 0 to 5 foot zone. And there are all different kinds of ideas on how you can make your property look attractive and reduce its vulnerability to fire. As we're moving down the siding of the house, also at the base of your siding, above the foundation, there's another important place to have a drip edge. And if leaves or other things accumulate right at ground level under there, they can actually go up and set the underside of your siding on fire. So having a small metal flashing there is a really good idea. Again, this is not an expensive fix, but I'm sort of highlighting main vulnerabilities. So these are things you might want to consider if you don't have them in place now. The other thing you want to do is next time there's wind blowing around, look around your house and see where leaves accumulate, because that's probably going to be the same place that embers accumulate. So you can see the person on the right did a kind of a creative thing. You can see that they've created hardscaping in a corner where there's likely to be accumulation. And the place where I was talking about that drip edge is right below the gray siding and above the foundation. Next thing we'll talk about is fencing or other structures that connect directly to your house or other structures. And fire folk often call lath kindling. It catches fire really easily. If you have lath anywhere near your home, that's another kind of thing you want to look at and deal with, because if you look on the picture on the left, there's grass right up against the fencing, and it catches fire very easily and then can transfer over to your house. And this photo shows a case in point where the fence caught fire and now it's moved over and it's set the house on fire. One of the solutions to this is to break up wooden fencing or other things with, say, a metal gate or just an opening is better than having the wooden fencing connect directly to your house. We've been working on our place for about 10 years since the Martin fire, and we're just now getting to the point where we're replacing all our wooden gates with metal gates. So this is not something that you should think you have to do overnight, but you walk around your house, you look at the vulnerable areas, and then you just tackle them as you can and make progress as you go. This photo, the one in the upper left, shows you a very common practice, but a big no-no if you want to protect your home from fire, and that is storing material, especially flammable material, under a deck. The deck is usually attached to the house. That embers blow into that wood stack, and you are going to lose your house. The fellow on the right has done a good job of creating a good space under his house to keep fire from coming in. But if there were a red flag warning and I was him, I would walk under here, look and see if any leaves or other debris have accumulated someplace and rake those all out. And then we're also talking about after the 0 zone, the 5 to 30-foot zone around your house. And again, I know many cases in Bonnie Doon where fire got within 12 feet, 15 feet of homes, and fortunately there were fire people there and they were able to stop them. But if your home were evacuated and there weren't enough fire people around, this is the kind of thing you want to avoid. You try and want to do as much as you can to make your house able to protect itself. So working in that 5 to 30-foot zone surrounding your house is also an important part of hardening your home. And now we have a little quiz. I'm going to show you a series of homes, and if you take a minute, look at this house and kind of jot down things you might do if you were this homeowner to make your house safe. I'm going to give you about 5-10 seconds because I don't want to take too much of your time, and then I'll kind of go over a list of the things that I see. But go ahead and take a look and see what you think. Okay, well, just a couple things. This house is on a bit of a slope, and flame lengths are longer as they move uphill than they are on flat ground. And it looks to me on the left-hand side of the house, they have a lot of rosemary. And one thing is aromatic resinous plants that have a lot of woody texture to them are not ideal close to the house. I would probably remove that rosemary from that location. Even more importantly, if you look under the deck on the left, on the right, they do have lath under there. So that would be another area to address. It looks like they have limbed up the trees in front of their house. They're sprouting back. Probably not that big a concern, but those could be limbed up again. If it were a red flag warning, they have something draped over their upper deck, I would probably take that out. And if I had wooden patio furniture on my deck, I might move it in the house. And then I'm not sure if the window under the main section is double paned or not, but there is a bush under there, so I would probably move that out. And also the trees in the background, I've learned that when the Ama Mutsun people lived here and managed this land for between 5,000 and 10,000 years, they would burn quite a bit through the area, and the forests at that time looked very different than the ones now. Tree ring studies have showed maybe 10 trees per acre, and now on average we have closer to 80 to 100 trees per acre. All those trees are competing for scarce moisture because they're close together. Disease and insects can spread easily, and the forest health is not as good probably now as it was back then. So thinning some of those trees behind the house would probably make the ones that you left stronger and healthier, and it would also open up a bit, maybe a bit of grazing land for deer or other creatures, and it would also help to protect your home from fire. Okay, take a quick look at this house. Give you a few seconds to kind of think about what these people might do to make their home safer. Okay, well, probably the obvious one is that big tree right next to the house with the branches resting on the roof. You should at a minimum limb that tree up quite a ways. It would probably be safer to remove it. You have the bush in front of the window. Again, if that caught on fire, the heat could cause damage. The house is stucco, which is a good building material, But if you look at that gutter kind of in the front of the house, you'll see there's a wet patch on the wall behind it. That is probably an indication that that gutter is full of leaves and it's not able to drain down the drain pipe. So those are some things I see with this house that people might want to consider if it were your home. Okay, take a look here. This is probably a home pretty typical to the kind of construction we might see in Bonnie Doon or in the San Lorenzo Valley. This house could do quite a bit of work to make itself safer. Start by weeding. Looks like there's wooden patio furniture on the deck. There's trees that could be limbed up and thinned. So, you know, those are some things that you could do on this particular house. Okay, take a look at this house. Okay, well, this house has done a great job in the 30 to 100 feet out from the house section. They've mowed their grass down. They have the trees limbed up. They're separated from each other. That's all very good. They have a green lawn, but what I see is right up against the house, they have a whole bunch of vegetation. And do you remember that first photo I showed you of the house that burned down? I think this is the kind of situation they had. They had good clearance around it, but right up against their house, they had materials that were flammable that embers could get into and set the house on fire. Okay, we're almost done with the little quiz, but take a look at this house and see what you see here. Okay, well, I think it's probably obvious that that wood pile should be moved at least 30 feet away from the house. And even the covered, I'm not sure what it is, that's right next to the extension on their house should probably be moved away. Looks like they do have some dry grasses and wood planks. Under their deck looks pretty clean. There's a metal ladder, that's not too bad. But you know, they do look like they've done some clearing around the house in the 5-foot zone immediately surrounding the house. Okay. I think this is our last one, guys, so. Okay, well, this house is made of pretty good materials to resist fire, but they do live right next to a chute or a little valley where fire tends to run up those pretty quickly. So all that chaparral type vegetation is easily flammable, and even with a home that's made of well-constructed materials, that puts it at a great deal of vulnerability. It also has a complex roof line, not a lot of trees nearby, but something you'd want to check to make sure you didn't get any embers, which would definitely get up on the roof of this house. And looks like they've done some pretty good clearing on the right side of their house, but they have too much vegetation right up against the left side of their house. And just quickly talking about slope, the steeper the slope, the more spacing you want to have between trees. Fire flame lengths get much longer on steep slopes, so you have to have more clearance between your vegetation if you're anywhere near a slope. And I bring that up because remember the house I showed you with the wood pile beside it? This is another photo. This is a photo, another photo of it taken from a different angle. They were on a very steep slope, but they actually did quite a bit of clearing on the hillside downhill from their slope. These are friends of mine, and the photo on the right shows just after the fire. The fire got within 12 or 15 feet of their home, but they had done a lot of clearing, and because they had done all this clearing, they were actually able to save their home. You can see their neighbors on the right side of their house. That was on their property. They did not do clearing, and unfortunately those folks actually lost their home. And the other thing, this is actually from Coffee Park up in the Santa Rosa area, where a whole neighborhood burned. And what can happen is if fire gets in there, we originally talked about the radiant heat, and when these houses catch fire, they throw so much heat, they can easily catch the next house on fire. So the 0 to 5 foot zone is important, but also creating green belt around this area would help to lessen the number of embers getting in. But when fire does get into neighborhoods with closely packed homes, it's much harder to stop. Which leads me to the next point, which is FireWise communities. And FireWise is a nationwide program that provides a framework or structure for individual communities or neighborhoods to come together and work to make their entire neighborhood safer. In a way, it's kind of like Map Your Neighborhood. Some of you are familiar with that program, but this is specifically related to fire. Sorry. And what neighbors do is they do a couple educational events, something like this presentation as part of their FireWise program. They come together and help neighbors that may not be able to do the work themselves, or have work parties where they do work around their homes. And they also work on clearing their roads. Firefighters, just in our neighborhood, we had firefighters from San Luis Obispo and LA in our area. They're unfamiliar with their area. They don't know the roads. They are hesitant to go down roads that are closely vegetated on both sides, where they can't see where they're going. There's no turnaround spaces, etc. So FireWising your roads is making sure you have good street signage and all the house numbers are identified, good maneuverability for big vehicles and equipment, turnouts on narrow roads, and I think the law is that you have 25 feet of defensible space from the center of your road on either side. So communities that want to become FireWise will work on these kind of projects. And as a community, you would make a 5-year plan. You would prioritize the projects you wanted to work on, continue to work on them. And one of the things, the benefits, in addition to making your home safer, is up in Marin County, I think they currently have 76 FireWise communities. Many of them are adjacent to each other. So they've created these larger areas that have become FireWise certified. And if a firefighter from LA or somewhere else is in your area and they see a sign in your neighborhood that it's FireWise certified, they know that they're going to have a better chance of successfully defending homes in that area. Also, there are some insurance companies, USAA I think is one, that does offer some discounts for fire insurance. And at the statewide level, and Patty could probably speak to this more than I could, but they're working on legislation that makes it easier for homeowners who do the defensive work and in their homes and neighborhoods to be able to keep or get insurance. And lastly, another advantage to FireWise is a lot of kids feel empowered by doing work in their neighborhood. Fire is a scary thing, being moved from your home, and doing work to make your neighborhood safer, working with your fellow other kids and neighbors is a really good benefit of becoming FireWise. And real quickly, just at the end, on the Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County website, you can download this document, and I highly encourage you to do it. It's a 3-page document, and I'm just going to go over it real quickly. On this first page is a page you can cut off, and if you have to evacuate, you can tape this to your door. It tells the names of the resident address, how to contact them, number of residents on the property, those who stayed, those who evacuated, your intended evacuation destination if people are trying to find you. This can be helpful in finding where you've gone. And then if there are any particular things about your property that would be helpful, like giant dog in the backyard or something like that, you can put notices on there. The second page of this document, the column on the left, these are things you can start doing right away. Probably, I'm going to guess, everybody here has already signed up for Code Red. Especially during red flag warnings, keep your vehicles, gas tanks at least half full. If you're trying to evacuate and you get in a traffic jam, you do not want to be the person to run out of gas and block the people behind you. And all these columns are listed kind of in order of priority. So the most important things we've tried to list near the top, and other steps are further down. In the middle column near the bottom, I just wanted to point out one thing. When you are evacuating, there's certain kind of clothing you should wear. Wearing nylon clothing, if there are embers, it can melt the clothing to your up against you. You don't want that. We also saw those days where it was so incredibly smoky. If you have a reflective vest or jacket on, leather work gloves are important. If a tree branch or something is blocking the road and you have to get out and move it, having the gloves on. So there are some things here that are specific. You definitely don't want to be evacuating in flip-flops and shorts. I mean, if you have to get out of the car and embers are blowing, you don't want them to be hitting your bare legs. And then on the right-hand column, there's a little bit about defensible space and some priorities there. And this last page, we call the Visor Advisor. And if you print out 2 copies, one copy you can keep and tape it to your refrigerator. One copy you can put in the visor in your car. And what happened is, we knew that lightning had struck and was burning in not too far from our house. We hadn't gotten an evacuation order, but we started doing the steps in the column on the left-hand side before we got any kind of warning. It was just getting prepared. All this stuff can be put back. And again, it's listed in order of priority. You may start working on this and then it becomes time to go, so you go as far as you can. And then the middle column talks about actually evacuating. And going back to the first column, if there's fire nearby, you may want to take your pets, put them in a separate room, close the door while you go about doing other things. So if you do have to evacuate, you know where your pets are, you're not running around outside trying to find them. If you're evacuating in 2 cars, it's good to have walkie-talkies or radios and have the most experienced driver lead the way. It can be very dark, people can be panicking. And if one car falls behind, if you have the radios, you can talk to each other. So I would take a little time and read these steps and kind of familiarize yourself. And then the last column on the right is, you know, if you get trapped in your vehicle, there's some steps of what you can do. That's why you want to keep this in your car, a copy of this in your car. The worst case scenario is to be trapped on foot. In your car, you have at least some shelter from the heat. But if you are trapped on foot, here are some things you can try and do. And if you are not able to leave and you need to shelter in place in your home, you know, you can do things like put wet towels at the door of the base of the doors. Some of these things we learned in CERT. So there's some steps here. So this is just a kind of handy and practical guide that you can use that has lots of really good and useful information on it. And then lastly, if you like to read and you like disaster reading, this is an excellent book. Linda Masterson lost her home to a fire in Colorado. She was a reporter and a journalist, and she wrote a really great book on getting prepared, staying alive, and if you lose your home, how to rebuild it. It's not a long read. She writes very easily, and there's a really great section in there on insurance, what kind of insurance you should have, and how you can use your insurance effectively if you do lose your home to a fire. And lastly, this is just a page with some of the things I talked about. About 5 down, Jana Valakovic is a well-renowned home hardening specialist and on the Fire Safe Council of Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County website. We have a 2-hour video that goes into greater depth about the things I talked to you here about tonight. So that's my presentation, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, I have a question. What about wood chips on the ground? How bad a risk are those, like for to give ground cover?
We've moved all the wood chips. We used to use them extensively around the house. We've raked them all away from the 5-foot zone. Again, if they catch fire, they can become embers that blow. So I would not encourage them too close to the house. You know, use judiciously. If you want to preserve moisture, you could do pea gravel or you know, small stones or things like that would be good alternatives.
Okay, and the second thing is about Trex decking. How fireproof is Trex or, you know, artificial decking?
Trex will melt at high temperature. We have a redwood deck around our pool. It's on our list to replace, and there's some light concrete pavers that we have to build up the infrastructure under our deck after we pull the rafters off, but we're going to replace that with light concrete pavers instead of Trex. We looked into Trex.
Thank you.
Dan. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I noticed one of the things listed was to not leave sprinklers on. I just wanted to reinforce that. During the early part of the fires, one of the big issues that they had up in Forest Lakes was that somebody had left the sprinklers on, and it was actually had drained the tank, because the tank supply for the whole neighborhood, because the power was out and they didn't have any way to, it wasn't automatically refilling the tank, so they basically were draining all of their fire supplies. And for a while it was a big issue of how are we going to get a generator that could, you know, get up there and refill the tank. So besides the questionable efficacy of that, having a sprinkler on, it also could do a great deal of damage if the power is off.
Yeah, what we're doing right now, because there's going to be a red flag warning this coming weekend, is we're doing deep watering now, rotating among our vegetation. and giving them lots of moisture so that they'll be better prepared if it does get hot, that their roots, so we're doing deep watering right now in various beds in preparation for this weekend.
I got a question. The problem I'm struggling with in terms of how to fireproof my home, as well as seeing all the others in our neighborhood, is that the trees, I think, create quite a bit of a challenge for at least me, and how to, I don't know, at least scale the trees back a little bit. And it's almost as if maybe a resource for somebody to come out and, come give us advice on an individual basis. If there's some resource that's available for that, that would be helpful in that respect. Otherwise, it's a very expensive prospect to just go ahead and start cutting down trees or limbing trees. It's thousands of dollars. So I'm trying to, figure out a pathway to fireproof, or at least drop the probability of our house catching on fire because there's so many trees in the neighborhood.
In 2008, when the Martin fire happened up here, it got within a quarter mile of our house, and we were completely unprepared. I ended up running from room to room, grabbing this or that, and I didn't know what I was doing, etc. And it was after that fire that I got motivated to do that work. And what we've done, Chris, is we actually each year, we targeted trees closest to our house, and we would spend some money to do 1 or 2 trees. And then the next year we did another 1 or 2 trees, either limb them up or cut them down. And now it's 2020, and we've been doing that consistently, and we now have pretty good defensible space. Patty might be able to speak to this, but I think at the state level, they are, of course, they're always talking about funding, whether it'll actually ever come through or not, but to help neighborhoods do defensible work, because having people out of their homes, having them burned, is so disruptive in so many different ways that doing preventative work ahead of time makes a lot of sense. We'll see if that comes through. And as a result of this fire, we are getting a ton of requests to do just what you're asking, to come out and do that. At this point, we're a young organization, we're all volunteer, and we don't have the staffing to do that. But we are in talks with the Resource Conservation District of Santa Cruz County, and hopefully we'll be able to come up with a way that will help people like you and us make good decisions on what kind of tree work to do.
Okay, thank you.
I also wanted to add in there that we do have local people who can come out and help you assess and create a work plan for your property, the kind of thing that LizAnne was talking about. We have foresters, we have arborists, even some of the tree companies will come out and have this discussion with you, but their goal is often about, if you don't have a personal contact there, maybe more about cutting down trees than helping you clean up your property. There also may be some resources available through your local fire department. So I'm not speaking for the fire department, but I do know that some of these kinds of services of assessment are available. And then once you kind of have a plan, then as LizAnne suggested, just do it as you can and when you can, whether you have to hire it out or do it yourself, or get together a bunch of teenage folks in your neighborhood who can help with that kind of thing. You know, it might be something to look at as a neighborhood to organize some of this work. So those are all ideas that are out there. I would say, you know, go to the yellow pages and find some arborists. There may be information known through the university. I'm just throwing ideas out there. There's also an organization available through your telephone called 211, and they give information on all sorts of stuff. They're a service that's provided through the County of Santa Cruz. And if you needed to find a doctor locally to you, you could call them. If you needed to find out, you know, how to find out about bus routes, you could call them. Well, I suspect you could call them about this kind of thing as well to find out who the arborists or foresters in your area might be. So those are my ideas.
Thank you. I've got a curiosity of particularly about the fire safe councils. Since we have Patty Ciesla with us on this call, Patty, I wonder if you wouldn't mind taking a moment and maybe just giving us another perspective on what is Fire Safe Council as you know it, since you're both in the local area and the state of California. What could you tell us?
Well, thank you. First of all, let me just say that LizAnne, your presentation was excellent. I thought you did a great job. Covered all the really important points. It had some great examples at the end there for people to look at, you know, the good and bad. Fire safe councils take many different forms in California. There's no one way to create or be a fire safe council. In many parts of California, the Resource Conservation District will act as the local fire safe council. I know that they are partnered closely with Fire Safe Santa Cruz County. So they're kind of, it's a team effort here. The fire safe councils can be different sizes. They can be small like Bonnie Doon or large like a county fire safe council. Generally, they're a nonprofit organization with a volunteer board of directors, and some of them are funded well enough that they can have paid staff, but most fire safe councils don't actually have paid staff. And that is a challenge. I mean, the biggest challenge in California with fire prevention right now is the firefighters are exhausted. They're busy putting out the fire, so they're not really available right now, by and large across the state, to do a lot of work during fire season to help people prepare. The time to engage with your local fire department is when it's raining. You know, they have the time to come out and consult with you. I've actually been giving some thought to what we can do at the state level for coordinating with the counties and local fire safe councils to help organizations be more effective locally. We have some money to give away. Unfortunately, the need is huge and the funding is small. And so realistically, the funding that the California Fire Safe Council has for these things, by the time you divvy it up with all of the areas at risk, it doesn't go nearly far enough. So it's really up to the locals to do as much as they can to raise funds and find volunteers to do the work. The consulting part, I think, of terms of going out to somebody's house, that is a service that's very hard for volunteers to do a lot of. It takes time. It takes about an hour minimum, you know, up to 2 hours to do a really good evaluation of a property, make your recommendations in writing, explain it to the property owner, help weigh the pros and cons of the costs of doing things, what you should tackle first and what you should save for later if you have limited funds. you know, what are your strategies, like as LizAnne mentioned, doing a little each year to get some of those more challenging efforts at least started. You know, we never know when fire is going to come. It could be 20 years from now in your neighborhood. So doing that piece by piece is important. The other thing is engaging with a FireWise community effort really magnifies everybody's input to make the whole community more fire safe than if you just did your own home alone. You know, your escape routes, your signage, your road width, your community support for each other in the event of a wildfire. You know, what happens if a wildfire strikes and you're at work? Who's going to take care of your cat or your dog? So FireWise can really help bring the community together to be ready for wildfire and to be more connected. You know, I joined this because I'm interested at what I can do locally in my community. I've had several people reach out to me and ask if I could do a home consultation, and as time allows, I am going to be offering that. But really, for a long term, you know, with over 70,000 homes in the WUI, there's just no way that we're going to get it all evaluated quickly. There's just not enough people to do that work. And so, you know, I encourage everybody to do your reading, self-educate, pick up the books that were recommended, go to the website and read and learn and let it get absorbed, and then pick a project that you know you need to do. If you need to pull the mulch away from your house, go do that. If you know that you need to remove that bush that's under your window, go do that. And get started on something so that you've invested a little bit of your effort. That will really help you with your own inertia to keep going. I don't know if I answered all the questions that you guys might have for me, but if anybody else has anything that they want to ask me, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yes, Liz.
I just, probably all of this information is going to have an overall, it's going to sound like the same story over and over and over again. And what I mean is about the recommendations. A lot of people have been concerned about the requirements for the 5 feet and the 30 feet. What was the 30 feet and is now the 100 feet where possible. And I just want to let you know that another location for more information, which is, like I said, just probably going to cross-validate what's available from the Fire Safe Council, is through CAL FIRE. And we have the advantage of having CAL FIRE right here in our backyard, so to speak, in Felton. So yeah. That's another good source of information. And I don't know if they do property right now. They don't, definitely, but you know, that might be another source. And the other thing is, you know, if you know somebody who knows a lot about this, even if they don't know 100%, if that's more than what you know, then you know, they might be available to help you. You may not get the 100%, but if you've covered your property 75% from working with somebody in your neighborhood who's knowledgeable, that's a lot better than nothing. So perfection, if we wait for perfection, we'll never get anything done. But if we, as Patty was commenting and LizAnne, you know, just overcoming your own inertia and starting to step forward one step at a time is a worthy goal. Anyway, that's it.
Sally, I was curious if you'd tell us a little bit more about what your experience is in your area with FireWise.
Yeah, so we moved up to the mountains in 2017, and I was newly pregnant and also concerned about the fires, and we had the risk assessment done on our property right away. And then I think a couple of years later, I heard about the FireWise program, and just wanted to connect the community on the road, and also realizing after having done a lot of, we went through a lot of our punch list, and we'll probably address a fair amount of it when we do some renovations to the house. But what I came across was that it's not enough to just save our own house. It's really, if our neighbors aren't clearing or have brush, they pose just as much of a risk to our home. And started this committee by having a presentation given to the road, and there were a couple of people who showed interest, and then we formed a committee. And sadly, but I guess in a fortunate way, the recent fires have really motivated people to get on board with a lot of the recommendations that we were kind of soft suggesting, and they're looking for someone to kind of take the lead and just shepherd the way. And so, there's still a lot of things that we have to tackle, but I wanted to do my own work first to really understand all of the steps of home hardening, and before I could, kind of educate the neighbors. And I think to Liz's last point, I've started to do kind of these informal assessments for neighbors. I tell them I'm not certified, but here are all the things that I've learned, and we walk around the house and I point out the things that easy wins that they can do, because there are a lot of old timers who have lived through a fire risk before, who are not as motivated, and then there are a lot of new people who've come to the road, and fire risk is just a completely new threat that they're living with, and so they're very receptive. But I did have a question, because I've been following a lot of different resources recently. There's a fire remediation Facebook group that's dealing with erosion concerns, and there are permaculture groups that are talking about landscaping and resiliency, and then I'm kind of just, and then there's the RCD that are putting on these series of talks about forest management. And very excited about the information, but also a little bit overwhelmed on how to tackle that on my own property. And I'd like to create fire breaks. I'd like to add landscaping that's creating more moisture and humidity. I'd like to find more permaculture approaches to catching water. Our road has a steep road that goes all the way down 30 houses, and we're losing a lot of water. So my question is, are there conversations or interest out there where there's a coordinator amongst these cross-discipline groups to create some demonstration projects of how all these parties can work together?
What a great question.
Not really. Yeah, not really that I know of. It's definitely something that's needed, and I think the impetus coming from this fire will form some coalitions. But at this, maybe Patty can speak to this, but I am not, I think it's a really good idea. And I think getting realtors and architects and landscapers educated about these kind of issues from the fire perspective, all of these need to be done. But to my knowledge, there isn't something yet, but we're working towards it.
Yeah, that's a big step for a lot of these smaller organizations, is to try and cope with the concept of mission creep. The RCD definitely has a much broader mission than the Fire Safe Council. I mean, they have water quality, soil preservation, forest health, which can be different than fire safety, can deal with disease and other things. And so their mission is quite broad. And you may find that there are a wide variety of experts available at the RCD and other information that they can point you to for more learning on that. You know, and I would encourage you to attend any of their events where they're offering education, and bring your neighbors with you. You know, I think it's important for the Fire Safe Council to be clear on their mission and, you know, make sure that they don't expand too far beyond what their bandwidth is capable of coping with. As an all-volunteer organization, you can't chase every opportunity. You have to pick and choose. So I wouldn't expect the Fire Safe Council to be super active in erosion control. Although the individuals in the Fire Safe Council may have a very serious interest in that for their neighbors, and, you know, if their home is vulnerable to debris flow or something like that. So yeah, the RCD's got a much broader mission than the Fire Safe Council. Might be your place to go for that.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to tag on to that, if I may, Tammy, very quickly. The other thing about RCD, at least locally, is sometimes they have money for projects.
Absolutely.
And that even a little seed money can be turned into a whole field of flowers with enough volunteer work. But sometimes just needing that seed money having that seed money is what gets things kicked off. And so I would recommend people check in with them and find out what can be organized through them as well. So I just wanted to comment to Sally and others who are looking at trying to create something in their own neighborhoods. Besides bringing people together to advise them of what can be done, sometimes if you step forward, if you can step forward and start doing something, then others will get the idea that it's okay for them to be motivated and do something. I find sometimes leadership is just a matter of getting out with your shovel and doing what needs done, and if others don't follow, well, at least you got yours done. But, you know, amazing amount of work can be done in a neighborhood, just being out doing your own and talking to people as they walk by and things like that.